In an all-too-familiar tale, a young man of color, high school dropout, unemployed with a past record of trouble with the law, is picked up by the police and convicted of a crime he didn't commit. And that's Juwan Kennell's story. Out of all the voices calling for help, how does someone like Juwan make his voice heard? Well, that's the question he has spent the last 20 plus years trying to answer. In June of 2002, a few days after the St. Louis Police Department were called to the scene of a shooting homicide in Walnut Park, they came back and identified Juwan Kennell as the suspect and charged him with the murder of Freddie Chu. Juwan was assigned representation by the public defender's office while he awaited arraignment in the city's new half-full $300 million Justice Center. It all seemed to be a case of mistaken identity, one that should be easily cleared up by simply vetting Mr. Kennell's alibi. You see, the murder of Freddie Chu had occurred at approximately 5 a.m. on June 21st, 2002, a date and time at which Juwan would have been found in bed at his grandmother Hattie Bolton's home. An alibi easily confirmed by Mrs. Bolton and Kennell's two younger siblings, Hatta and Patrick Holmes. The alibi was further confirmed by an unbiased electronic activity log for the home security system. On top of that, the St. Louis Police Department and city prosecutor Robert Craddock had fallen on the motive of revenge for Kennell's actions in the death of Mr. Chu, a motive brought to their attention by one of the prosecution's key witnesses and allegedly intended target Jeffrey Shockley. Based on Shockley's own words, the state was asserting Juwan Kennell and two other assailants drove up to Freddie Chu's residence in search of Shockley with the intent to exact revenge for the shooting death of Juwan Kennell's younger brother, Jesse Kennell, which is certainly a viable motive, that is if it was true at all. If the police would actually done their job and investigated the incident, the evidence would have shown that Jesse Kennell was alive and well, living in the St. Louis area. Void of arguable motive and possessing a sound alibi, Juwan Kennell's nightmare should have soon been over. The preeminent failure of the police department's investigative efforts were further compounded by Juwan's public defender, Afacha IB, who not only failed to depose Juwan's grandmother and siblings as evidence of his alibi, but also failed to file a notice of alibi defense with the court, effectively barring Kennell's ability to present his defense once it was apparent the case would proceed to trial. To make matters worse, shortly after Kennell was convicted, IB left the public defender's office for a position with the state's attorney general. In a later evidentiary hearing on appeal, IB would go on to testify she was ignorant of her responsibility for filing a notice of alibi defense. Despite such a great setback, all hope that justice would eventually prevail was not yet lost for Juwan Kennell. Aside from Jeffrey Shockley, there were three additional witnesses to Freddie Chu's murder: Chu's fiancée Jacqueline Daugherty, a neighbor Damon Stour, and a man named Robert Stewart, who admitted to being involved in the shooting along with Jeffrey Shockley. Neither Stour nor Daugherty's descriptions matched Juwan. Additionally, Juwan was not identified by Stour and Daugherty at trial or during police photo lineups. Although Robert Stewart did identify Juwan Kennell as present, Stewart first identified a man named Corey Hughes immediately following the shooting. Then in a later private investigation, Stewart would admit to being coached by Shockley to ID Juwan Kennell and a third man, Cortez Vincent, who coincidentally was already incarcerated at the time of Chu's death. In fact, none of the physical descriptions offered by any of the witnesses matched Juwan Kennell. The police department's photo record of Juwan from a recent arrest a month prior showed that the only thing that he had in common with the description given by the witnesses was the fact that he happened to be a black man. The single point of evidence even linking Juwan Kennell to the murder a little bit was a set of prints lifted from the outside of a car abandoned by the shooters at the scene, a Ford Tempo. The car was registered to a local man named Donald Toney, who was known to privately rent out the vehicle. 3 additional sets of prints were lifted from inside the car, one of which were identified as belonging to Jesse Kennell, the reportedly deceased brother of Juwan, according to the state's key witness, Jeffrey Shockley. The arrangement of the prints corroborated Juwan's testimony of having leaned against the car a day or 2 prior while talking to his brother Jesse, who had stopped by the Bolton residence at the time. The state never sought to question the owner of the Tempo to verify who the car had been rented by. The police never sought to locate and question Jesse Kennell, and the police failed to verify Corey Hughes' alibi of having been with his girlfriend at the time of the incident, ultimately dismissing Hughes as a suspect. Again, through private investigations years later, Corey Hughes' girlfriend has denied that he was with her at her home at the time of Chu's death. In 2003, Juwan Kennell was found guilty of murder in the first degree and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole by a jury who was never afforded the opportunity to hear his alibi, consider the evidence supporting that alibi, or weigh the multitude of significant evidence pointing to several other more likely suspects and the blatant failings of those involved in the state's investigation of Chu's death. In addition to the latent evidence of new and recanted testimonies, a private investigation has also uncovered the fact that prosecutor Robert Craddock paid Jeffrey Shockley for his testimony, as well as reduced the sentence he was previously facing for manslaughter and possession. And for those of you that don't know, first-degree murder is the most serious of all homicide offenses. It involves any intentional murder that is willful and premeditated. So I honestly just don't understand how they was able to charge him with first-degree murder when the evidence just don't support that. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for watching. Remember, if it's more interesting, you can find it here. And if you would like to support Juwan, you can go sign the petition at change.org.